A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
I was in the middle of a deep dive research session yesterday, trying to map out some complex automation workflows, when it happened. That little red banner popped up at the bottom of my screen telling me I had reached my usage limit for the next 4 hours. I am paying $200 a month for the top tier plan, and yet, here I am, being told to go take a nap because the servers are tired. It is a very specific kind of modern frustration, Herman. It is like having a high-end sports car that the manufacturer remotely disables if you drive it for more than 20 minutes. You are sitting there ready to work, your brain is in the flow, and suddenly the tool just quits.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I know that feeling all too well, Corn. It is the psychological burden of the progress bar. We have entered this era where you start second-guessing every single prompt. You find yourself wondering if this specific question is worth a unit of your remaining capacity. It kills the creative spark because you are constantly auditing your own curiosity. Today's prompt from Daniel is about exactly this shift. He is asking why we have moved from the unlimited honeymoon phase of AI into what people are calling the cold monetization era of March 2026. He wants us to dig into the economic reality of why these rate limits are getting tighter, even as the technology supposedly gets better and more efficient.
It really does feel like we have hit a thermodynamic wall. A couple of years ago, the promise was that tokens would become too cheap to meter, sort of like how long-distance phone calls or internet bandwidth eventually became essentially free. We were told that as the models got smaller and the chips got faster, the cost would vanish. But here we are in late March of 2026, and it feels like we are back in the 1990s, counting every minute we spend online, so we do not run up a massive bill or get kicked off the service. Why does it feel like we are moving backward?
The comparison to early internet bandwidth is actually quite poignant, but the underlying physics are fundamentally different. We are moving from a world of software as a service, where the marginal cost of one more user was nearly zero, to utility as a service. In software, once you write the code, serving it to the millionth person costs almost nothing. In AI, every single word generated requires a literal physical reaction in a data center. If you look at the Anthropic usage limit crisis from just 2 days ago on March 23rd, users on the Max plan were reporting session lockouts after only 15 minutes of intensive work. That is not a software bug, Corn, it is a circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker implies that something is about to blow up if they do not pull the plug. Is the grid literally melting when I ask Claude to refactor my Python code? Or is this just a way to squeeze more money out of us?
In a sense, the grid is under immense pressure. We have to talk about the thinking token paradox. This is the core reason why your subscription feels like it is shrinking even though you are paying more. A year ago, if you asked a model a question, it would generate, say, 500 tokens of output, and that was the extent of the compute cost. But the frontier models we are using now, like Gemini 3.1 Pro or the latest Claude iterations, use massive amounts of inference time compute. They are reasoning internally before they ever show you a word.
So even though I only see 100 words on my screen, the model might have burned through 10,000 tokens of internal monologue just to get there?
That is exactly the math. We have seen instances where the ratio is 50 to 1 or even 100 to 1. While the price per token for simple generation has dropped 10 times year over year, the volume of tokens required for a reasoned answer has exploded by nearly 100 times. The efficiency gains are being swallowed whole by the complexity of the reasoning chains. You are paying for the thought, not just the text, and thoughts are incredibly expensive to produce right now. This is the speed of thought context we discussed back in episode 1479. The new era of inference means the model is doing more work per query than ever before.
It is like hiring a consultant who charges you for the 3 hours he spent thinking in the shower before he sent you a 2-sentence email. I guess I can respect the effort, but it makes the unlimited dream feel like a total fantasy. If each reasoning query is that heavy, how does any company stay solvent offering a flat rate subscription? I mean, $200 sounds like a lot, but if I am doing thousands of these heavy queries, am I actually costing them money?
In many cases, yes, they are losing money on the power users. That is why we saw Google pivot on March 17th, moving free users almost exclusively to Gemini Flash and reserving the Pro models for a much stricter usage credit pool for paid subscribers. The economics of unlimited simply do not work when the marginal cost of a single complex query can be measured in cents rather than fractions of a cent. When you multiply that by millions of users, the numbers become staggering.
And it is not just the chips, is it? I keep hearing about the TSMC Brake and how manufacturing capacity is the bottleneck, but there is a deeper layer here, involving the actual components on those boards. I read a report that even if we had all the GPUs in the world, we would still be hitting a wall.
You are hitting on the memory bottleneck. Everyone talks about the GPUs, but inference is fundamentally memory bound and latency sensitive. In the first quarter of 2026, we have seen DRAM and NAND prices surge by 30 to 40%. When NVIDIA's Blackwell architecture, the B200s and GB200s, entered volume production in February, it put an incredible strain on the supply chain for high bandwidth memory. If the memory costs more and the energy to run it costs more, the floor for how cheap a reasoning step could be is much higher than we anticipated.
Let's talk about that energy floor for a second. I saw a report that the grid interconnection queues in Virginia's data center alley are now 5 to 7 years long. If you want to build a new AI cluster there, you basically have to wait until the end of the decade just to plug it into the wall. It sounds like we are literally running out of electricity.
It is a crisis of physical reality. This is why you see the hyperscalers making massive, almost desperate-looking bets on energy. They are not just buying green energy credits anymore, they are investing in small modular reactors, or SMRs, to be built directly on site. Microsoft and Amazon are essentially becoming nuclear power companies that happen to run servers. The cold monetization we are seeing is a reflection of the fact that every token you generate has a literal carbon and caloric cost that is becoming harder to subsidize. The honeymoon of free or cheap, I was built on the back of venture capital and excess capacity. That capacity is gone.
It puts those Meta layoffs from March 13th into perspective. They cut 16,000 staff and explicitly stated they were reallocating $600 billion in capital toward AI infrastructure through 2028. When you're spending $600 billion on hardware and power, you stop being generous with your API rate limits. You start looking for every possible way to claw back margins. It is a massive pivot from being a social media company to being an infrastructure titan.
Meta is in a unique position because they are trying to play the open weights game while simultaneously building the world's largest compute cluster. But for companies like Anthropic or OpenAI, who do not have a massive social media ad engine to fund their compute habits, the pressure is even higher. They have to treat their tokens like a precious commodity. They are essentially selling digital intelligence by the gram.
I noticed Anthropic tried a different tactic on March 14th. They doubled the usage limits for off-peak hours. It felt like free nights and weekends from the old cellular phone days. They are trying to load balance their users because they cannot afford to have their infrastructure sitting idle at 3 in the morning while everyone is hitting it at 10 in the morning. It is a very utility-like way to manage a network.
It is a classic utility play. If you can move the heavy lifters to off-peak times, you maximize the utilization of the hardware you have already paid for. But for the professional user, the person trying to get work done during business hours, it creates this constant friction. Figma is a great example of this. They recently started enforcing their AI credit system, and professional users are reporting that their entire monthly allocation can be exhausted in 45 minutes of intensive design work. 45 minutes.
That is barely enough time to choose a font, Herman. If I am a professional designer and my AI assistant quits on me before my first coffee break, that is not a tool. It is a tease. It feels like we are in this awkward middle ground where the tools are smart, enough to be essential, but the infrastructure is too dumb or too expensive to support them actually being used. It is the agentic throughput gap we talked about in episode 1078. If my agent is supposed to be my digital twin, but it has the attention span of a goldfish because it runs out of tokens, it is not an agent. It is just a very fancy, very expensive calculator that I have to keep feeding quarters.
And the quarters are getting more expensive. We should also mention the TSMC Brake more specifically. It is not just about having enough chips, it is about the CoWoS packaging capacity. That is the chip-on-wafer-on-substrate process that allows the memory and the logic to sit close enough to talk to each other at high speeds. TSMC is building new plants as fast as they can, but you cannot software patch a physical factory. It takes years to bring that capacity online. This is why the unlimited dream is on hold. We are waiting for the physical world to catch up to the digital imagination.
So, we are stuck in this cold monetization period for at least another 18 to 24 months. What is the takeaway for the person listening to this who just wants to get their work done without seeing a red banner? How do we survive the AI oil shock of 2026?
The first takeaway is to diversify your model stack. Do not rely on a single provider. If you hit a limit on Claude, you need to have a Gemini or an OpenAI account ready to go. You have to spread your compute load across different providers. Second, embrace the small language models, or SLMs. Use models like Gemini Flash or the Haiku class of models for anything that doesn't require deep reasoning. You can save your reasoning tokens for the final assembly or the hardest logic problems. It is about being a smart consumer of compute.
It is basically compute management. We are all becoming mini CTOs of our own personal compute clusters. You have to decide which workload goes to the expensive cloud and which stays on the cheap local machine. It is a far cry from the magic button we were promised. I have to think about whether a task is pro level or flash level before I even type a word.
It is, but it is also a sign that the technology is maturing. When something moves from magic to utility, it gets boring, it gets expensive, and it gets metered. We are seeing the industrialization of intelligence. And just like the industrialization of anything else, it requires a massive amount of physical infrastructure that has to be paid for. We are moving toward a world where you will pay for what you use, just like you do with your phone data or your electricity. Nick Turley at OpenAI was very clear about this recently. He said that unlimited plans are like unlimited electricity plans. They don't make sense. They are trying to manage our expectations.
I hate that analogy, Herman. I really do. The beauty of the internet was the lack of a ticking clock. The moment you introduce a meter, you kill the spirit of experimentation. If every time I try a weird what-if prompt, I am burning a hole in my daily allowance, I'm going to stop being creative. I'm going to stick to the safest, most efficient uses. That feels like a massive net loss for the culture of AI. We are training ourselves to be less curious, because curiosity is now a line item on a bill.
I agree with the sentiment, but the math is indifferent to our feelings. When you consider that a single high-end reasoning query can consume as much electricity as a light bulb left on for an hour, the unlimited model starts to look like a recipe for bankruptcy for the providers. They are caught between wanting to dominate the market and needing to survive the thermodynamic wall. They are rationing intelligence because they have to.
Let's talk about the Rubin architecture you mentioned earlier. Is that really the cavalry coming over the hill, or is it just another incremental step that will be immediately overwhelmed by even more complex models? It feels like every time we get a 10 times increase in efficiency, the researchers find a way to make the models 100 times more computationally hungry.
It is a version of Jevons paradox. As the cost of a resource falls, the demand for it increases so much that the total consumption actually goes up. NVIDIA's Rubin chips, which we expect in late 2026 or early 2027, are supposed to use HBM4 memory. That is the point where the cost per query might finally drop enough to make unlimited feel real again for the current level of models. But you are right. By the time Rubin is in every data center, we will likely have models that use even more. Thinking tokens to solve even harder problems. The frontier will always be metered.
So we're just in a perpetual state of scarcity. The unlimited era might never actually arrive for the best AAI. It will only arrive for the last year's AAI. I can have all the GPT-4 tokens I want, but I will always be rationed on the GPT-6 or whatever the next frontier is.
That is a very astute way to put it. You will have unlimited access to the AI of 2024 today, but the AI of 2026 will always be metered. This brings us back to the Edge AI solution. The only real escape hatch from the rate limit trap is running models on device. If you can run a good enough model on your laptop's NPU, you have unlimited access because you own the hardware and you are paying the electric bill directly. The frontier models, the big reasoning engines, will become the special forces you only call in when the local model fails.
So the play for a power user right now is basically distillation. Use the tiny free on-device model for the grunt work, and save your precious Claude Pro tokens for the stuff that actually requires a PhD level brain. It requires a lot more manual management than the one box does. Everything. Promise we were sold. It is like having a hybrid car, where you have to manually flip a switch to decide when to use the battery and when to use the gas.
It does. It requires a level of technical literacy that most casual users don't want to deal with. But this is the reality of the cold monetization era. We are moving from the discovery phase of AI to the deployment phase, and deployment is where the bills come due. The thermodynamic wall is real, and we are all hitting it at the same time. The companies are struggling with the economics, the grids are struggling with the load, and the users are struggling with the limits.
I suppose I should stop complaining about my $200 subscription and start realizing that I am probably still being subsidized, even at that price point. If a single reasoning query costs 5 cents, and I am doing thousands of them, the company is likely losing money on me. It is a weird feeling to be a burden on a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
In many cases, you are. They are playing a long-term game of market capture, hoping that the Rubin era arrives before their venture capital runs out. But the usage credit pools and the session lockouts are the signs that the unlimited party is officially over. We are moving toward a world where intelligence is treated as a utility. It is the industrialization of thought.
It is a metered future. I guess I will just have to learn to think a bit more efficiently myself, so I don't have to rely on the model to do all the reasoning for me. Or I could just move my office to a nuclear power plant and see if they will let me plug directly into the reactor. Maybe then I can get a full hour of work done without a red banner.
I would not recommend that for your health, corn, but it would certainly solve your latency issues. The reality is that we are in a transition period. We are moving from the honeymoon to the marriage, and the marriage involves a budget. The AI oil shock of 2026 is forcing everyone to be more intentional. The companies that survive will be the ones that can squeeze the most intelligence out of every watt and every gram of silicon.
And the users who survive will be the ones who know how to hypermile their prompts. It is a strange new skill set, learning how to get the most out of a limited token budget. Thanks for the deep dive, Herman. This has been a lot to process, ironically enough. I feel like I need to go lie down and let my own internal thinking tokens reset.
Always a pleasure to dive into the technical weeds with you. There is so much happening beneath the surface of those simple chat boxes. It is easy to forget that there is a massive global infrastructure straining to produce every single word we see.
We should probably wrap this up before we exceed our own reasoning limit for the day. Big thanks to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes and managing our own internal compute.
And a huge thank you to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. Without them, we would be hitting our own rate limits pretty quickly. They are helping us bridge the gap in this cold monetization era.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you enjoyed this exploration of the cold monetization era and the thermodynamic wall, consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. It really does help us reach more people who are also staring at usage limit, banners, and wondering what happened to the dream.
Or find us at myweirdprompts.com for our full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We have over 1,500 episodes now covering every corner of this AI revolution, from the technical to the philosophical.
Including several on why your AI hits a wall and the new era of inference, which are great companions to this discussion. Check out episodes 1078 and 1479 if you want to go even deeper into the agentic throughput gap and the speed of thought.
Until next time, keep your prompts sharp and your thinking tokens efficient. Don't waste them on the small stuff.
Catch you later. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, my weird prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the flows from slow